These are the R&B and soul feuds that rewrote music history. Bitter rivalries from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where smooth voices clashed off stage in chaos. From Motown showdowns to funk wars and diva battles, discover how jealousy, pride, and power shaped the legends we still celebrate. Let's pull back the curtain and dive into the stories behind the rivalries and the songs that defined an era of soul. Diana Ross versus Mary Wilson. To understand one of soul's most bitter rivalries, you have to start with the Supremes. In the 1960s, they weren't just Motown's biggest girl group, they were America's most successful female act, scoring 12 #1 hits. But while Diana Ross became the face of the trio, Mary Wilson felt increasingly pushed aside. The tipping point came in 1967, when Motown officially renamed the group Diana Ross and the Supremes. Mary later said it felt like history was being rewritten in real time, as if the group's legacy was being stolen to spotlight Diana alone. In her memoir, Wilson accused Ross of undercutting her behind the scenes, describing her as ambitious to the point of betrayal. The feud didn't die with the group. When Diana launched a solo career, she skyrocketed into superstardom, while Wilson struggled to match that success.
All my life I've been told what I can and cannot do.
Decades later, bitterness resurfaced in 2000 with the much-hyped Return to Love reunion tour. Promoters offered Ross millions, but Wilson and fellow former Supreme Cindy Birdsong were offered a fraction of that. Feeling insulted, they walked away. Without them, the tour collapsed after just a handful of dates.
And good vibrations won't let you go.
Ross has since insisted she harbored no ill will, but Wilson kept speaking about the wounds until her passing in 2021. What started as Motown's crown jewel became a decades-long Cold War, a reminder that even the sweetest harmonies can hide sharp edges. Diana Ross versus Aretha Franklin. If Mary Wilson was Diana Ross's rival inside the Supremes, Aretha Franklin became her rival on the outside.
Our lives had just begun.
When Ross left Motown's biggest group to go solo, she stepped into a world where Aretha was already the undisputed queen of soul. The press loved pitting them against each other. Ross, the glamorous crossover star; Franklin, the powerhouse vocalist with gospel roots. The comparisons weren't always kind. Aretha reportedly downplayed Ross's vocal chops, hinting that Diana relied more on image than raw talent.
The reason that I breathe.
Ross, for her part, rarely responded, but the tension showed whenever their names came up together. To fans, it was a duel for the crown, who truly represented soul at its peak. Though they never exchanged public punches like rock stars did, the cold distance between them was impossible to ignore.
So much of my life still not completed.
Award shows, industry events, even tributes. Whenever both women were in the same room, people whispered about whether they'd acknowledge each other at all. Unlike Ross and Wilson's feud, this one never had an explosive finale. It was more of a silent standoff. Two icons circling each other for decades, never reconciling, but forever linked as rivals in the soul pantheon. Aretha Franklin versus Patti LaBelle. After decades of quiet tension with Diana Ross, Aretha Franklin found herself measured against another powerhouse, Patti LaBelle. This wasn't about Motown glamour versus gospel grit. Patti came from the same deep church tradition as Aretha, with a soaring range that made comparisons impossible to avoid. For years, their relationship was defined by distance. Patti regularly spoke of admiring Aretha, but admitted they were never close. Aretha, fiercely protective of her Queen of Soul crown, rarely embraced Patty's presence in the spotlight. Whenever they crossed paths at concerts or tributes, fans sensed an invisible wall between them. The rivalry resurfaced dramatically in 2014 during the White House Women of Soul concert. Cameras caught Aretha striding past Patty, ignoring what looked like an offered handshake. The clip went viral, with fans convinced it was proof of long-simmering shade. Was it intentional? Was it simply a missed gesture? The debate only added to the legend. Unlike the Ross rivalry, which was fueled by media comparisons, Aretha and Patty's friction came from being too alike, two gospel-born titans unwilling to yield ground, their silent contest echoing through soul history. Coming right up, the Queens of Soul fought with shade and silence, but the Kings took their battles to a far more dangerous level. James Brown versus Joe Tex. The diva rivalries may have been cold and calculated, but among male soul stars, things sometimes turn violent.
James Brown!
Few clashes were as notorious as James Brown versus Joe Tex, two Georgia-born performers whose egos were as loud as their stage shows. It started with style. Joe Tex accused Brown of stealing his cape routine, the dramatic act of collapsing on stage only to be revived by a cape draped over his shoulders. Tex mocked the performance in his own shows, turning Brown's signature moment into parody. In an industry where showmanship was currency, that cut deep.
They're at home and mind the children while he's going to work.
The feud boiled over in 1963 at a nightclub in Macon, Georgia. Accounts differ, but the most infamous version says Tex taunted Brown in a song, and Brown later stormed the venue with armed men. Shots were fired, chaos erupted, and several people were injured. Whether exaggerated or not, the story cemented the idea that this rivalry wasn't just musical, it was dangerous. Despite the violence, both men continued to thrive in their careers. Brown would go on to be called the Godfather of Soul, while Tex carved his lane with funk-driven hits like Skinny Legs and All. But the feud never truly cooled. The shadow of that night in Macon followed them both for decades. This was soul's dark underbelly, when pride, parody, and personal grudges spilled off the stage and into real-life gunfire. Marvin Gaye versus Berry Gordy. Not every feud in soul came from jealousy or violence. Sometimes it was a war over art itself, and no story captures that better than Marvin Gaye's battle with Motown boss Berry Gordy. By the late 1960s, Gaye was Motown's smooth hitmaker, known for love songs that kept the label at the top of the charts. But the Vietnam War, urban unrest, and his own personal struggles pushed him in a new direction. He brought Gordy a song called What's Going On, a socially conscious plea wrapped in silky production. Gordy hated it. He reportedly called it the worst thing I've ever heard in my life, and feared political music would ruin Motown's hit-making formula. Marvin refused to back down. He stopped recording altogether, telling Gordy he wouldn't sing another note until the song was released. For months, the standoff froze one of Motown's biggest stars. Finally, Gordy relented in 1971, and the single became a massive hit, followed by an album that is now considered one of the greatest of all time. Unlike other rivalries, this one didn't end in bitterness. Marvin won his freedom, Gordy kept his star, and the world got a masterpiece. but it showed just how much power struggles could shape the very sound of soul. Coming up, the diva wars and Motown battles give way to the funk explosion of the 1980s. And no rivalry burned hotter than Prince versus Rick James. In the late 70s, Rick James was the undisputed super freak, the wild man of funk whose outrageous stage shows and chart success made him Motown's biggest star. Then along came Prince, younger, quieter off stage. But just as flamboyant on stage, with a new wave twist that threatened to eclipse James's crown. At first, they toured together. Rick invited Prince to open for him on the Fire It Up tour in 1980.
The 1980 Fire It Up tour with Rick James and the Stone City Band and special guest Prince.
But instead of mentorship, James saw competition. Prince stole the spotlight with stripped-down, guitar-driven sets that felt fresh, and critics quickly dubbed him the future of funk. Furious, James lashed out. In interviews, he called Prince a little nothing and accused him of stealing his style, from the sex-charged lyrics to the flashy costumes. Behind the scenes, James tried to sabotage Prince's rise, reportedly cutting him off from promoters and mocking him at shows. But the tide had already turned. By the mid-80s, Prince's Purple Rain era had cemented him as a global icon. While James's career struggled under legal troubles and industry shifts, what started as a tour rivalry became symbolic. Old school funk versus the new wave of pop-funk genius. Prince didn't just beat Rick James in sales, he rewrote the genre's future. Chaka Khan versus Rufus. While Prince and Rick James battled over funk's future, another war was raging inside one of the era's most successful bands, Rufus. At the center was their powerhouse singer, Chaka Khan. Rufus broke through in the mid-1970s with hits like Tell Me Something Good, penned by Stevie Wonder. But as the band's fame grew, so did Chaka's. Her voice and fiery stage presence became the group's unmistakable signature. And audiences began associating Rufus with her more than the collective. By the late 70s, the record label leaned into that narrative, rebranding them as Rufus featuring Chaka Khan. For the band, it felt like erasure. Years of hard work reduced to backing a single star. For Chaka, it meant being caught between loyalty to her bandmates and the undeniable pull of a solo career. Tension simmered during tours and recording sessions, with disputes over credit and direction. Eventually, the split became inevitable. Chaka launched a solo career in 1978, quickly proving she could thrive on her own with songs like I'm Every Woman. Rufus, without her full time, slowly faded. It was less about betrayal and more about inevitability. One voice too powerful to be contained within a group. Teddy Pendergrass versus Harold Melvin. Chaka Khan wasn't the only singer whose talent outgrew the band. Around the same time, another voice was causing a rift, Teddy Pendergrass with Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. In the early 70s, the Blue Notes were Harold Melvin's creation, but it was Teddy's rich, commanding baritone that powered hits like If You Don't, Know Me By Now, and Wake Up Everybody.
So excited when I come home a little late at night. It's coming up and the world is in their hands.
Fans weren't flocking to see the group, they were coming to hear Teddy. That imbalance sparked a war. Pendergrass wanted higher pay and top billing, arguing that his voice had become the band's identity. Melvin refused, insisting the group's name and legacy mattered more than one singer. The standoff grew bitter, spilling into heated arguments backstage and tension on tour. By 1975, the break was inevitable. Teddy walked away, launching a solo career that turned him into an R&B superstar, selling out arenas and setting a new standard for male soul singers. The Blue Notes never regained the same magic. This feud showed a recurring truth in soul music. When one voice rises too far above the rest, the group behind it almost always pays the price.
I can remember hoping that you and
Good or bad, these feuds created some of the best soul songs in history. And in the next video, we are uncovering 12 of them. So click the video and screen now to watch 15 R&B soul songs we'll never forget from 1971.